Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're embarking on a genuinely profound exploration of one of the most fascinating texts in all of Eastern philosophy, the Mahayana Mahaparinirvana Sutra. We're zeroing in on chapter 2 of this massive text, and honestly, we are going to uncover something that completely flips the script on what most of us think we know about the Buddhist teachings. We're talking about the ultimate reality, this final, culminating message delivered literally right on the eve of the Buddha's passing. Okay, let's dive into this. When you hear the word Buddhism, what usually comes to mind? Probably concepts like impermanence, the idea that life is suffering, or maybe the concept of non-self, the idea that we're essentially just this fleeting collection of parts that eventually fade into nothingness. It sounds a little bit bleak, doesn't it? But is ultimate reality really just about suffering in a giant void? Well, this text challenges that common assumption head-on. It delivers a massive paradigm shift about what actually awaits at the absolute highest level of enlightenment. Section 1. The Eve of Nirvana. To really understand this shift, we first have to put ourselves in the emotional setting of the story. We're at the eve of Nirvana. The Buddha is preparing to physically pass away, and his followers, everyone from everyday laypeople to his most advanced disciples, are absolutely devastated. There's this one devoted layman named Kunda who steps forward, literally weeping, to offer a heartbreaking final meal. Seeing all this grief, the Buddha grounds them in the foundational teachings they've been practicing for years. He tells them, all worldly things are impermanent, like a water bubble. He's basically validating their understanding that the physical, material world is fragile, it's temporary, and it's inherently empty.
Section 2. The Four Inversions.
But here is where the text takes a magnificent turn. The Buddha realizes his disciples have actually swung the pendulum way too far. They're clinging so hard to this concept of impermanence that they are entirely missing the ultimate truth. Now, usually, worldly delusion means looking at our fragile lives and pretending they're permanent, right? It's treating worldly pleasures as true bliss, mistaking our everyday ego for true self, and seeing our deeply flawed world as pure. That is the basic delusion. But then the Buddha points out a second, even deeper layer of delusion, the four inversions. He reveals that by looking at the ultimate reality, at nirvana itself, and calling it impermanent, or calling it a void of non-self, or saying it lacks bliss, well, that is the true inversion. They are looking at the absolute highest truth of the universe and mistakenly seeing a bleak emptiness. And this brilliantly illustrates our third section, the analogy of the drunkard. The text gives us this incredibly striking visual to explain the problem. Imagine a man who has had far, far too much to drink. He looks up at the night sky, and because he is completely intoxicated, his mind is totally impaired. To him, the entire sky, the sun, the moon, the stars, they all appear to be wildly spinning out of control. He feels dizzy, he's terrified. But are the sun and moon actually spinning? Of course not. They are perfectly still. All of that chaos is entirely within the drunkard's own perception.
The text puts it perfectly, like the drunkard, seeing the sun and moon truly not spinning, but generating the thought of spinning. The Buddha is essentially telling his weeping disciples that just because they, intoxicated by worldly ignorance, perceive reality as constantly shifting, unstable, and devoid of any true self, that doesn't mean the ultimate truth actually is. The spinning is in their minds, not in the cosmos.
Section 4. Milk, Medicine, and Nectar. Now, you might be wondering, why did the Buddha teach non-self and impermanence so heavily in the first place if it wasn't the ultimate truth? Well, the text introduces this fascinating story within a story about a king and two very different physicians. So, there's this ignorant old doctor who blindly prescribes milk for every single disease, which just makes people sicker. Then, a new wise doctor arrives on the scene. Seeing all this damage, he strictly bans all milk. He tells the king milk is poison and the people actually heal. But much later, the king falls ill with a very specific severe fever. The wise doctor then says, okay, now you must drink milk from a well-fed cow. It is the absolute only cure. Naturally, the king is furious and totally confused, yelling, wait, you told me it was poison. So the crucial point is this. The wise physician knows that context is the ultimate cure. The Buddha is revealing that he is the wise physician. Before the Buddha came along, other philosophies blindly taught this ego-driven self that was making people spiritually sick, just like the bad milk. To cure them, the Buddha strictly banned the idea of self, teaching impermanence instead. But now, at the very end of his life, with his disciples finally cured of their worldly egos, he's prescribing the true milk.
he is finally ready to reveal the ultimate unconditioned reality. Which brings us to Section 5, Eternity, Bliss, Self, and Purity.
This is the great reveal of the explainer. If ultimate reality isn't just some empty void, what exactly is it? The Buddha deeply explains this through 4 magnificent pillars. The first is eternity. While it's absolutely true that the physical body of the Buddha and the material world in general will fade and decay, the Buddha's true essence, what is called the Dharmakaya, or the Dharma body, is forever constant. It doesn't die. It is an eternal, unchanging presence that grounds the entire universe. The second pillar is bliss. His followers were terrified that entering nirvana meant just blinking out of existence into a cold, dark nothingness. But here, the Buddha corrects that assumption completely. He defines nirvana not as a void, but as a state of supreme, unconditioned, and radiant joy. It is completely and totally free from the constraints of worldly suffering. Third, and honestly this was probably the most shocking to his disciples, true self. For decades, they had meditated on non-self to destroy their selfish egos. But the text reveals that once you strip away that fragile, fake, worldly ego, what actually remains underneath is an unbreakable, sovereign, and entirely real true self. It is the constant nature of the Buddha that exists within all of us. And finally, the fourth pillar, purity. Unlike our physical world, which is stained by decay, attachments, and ignorance, this ultimate reality is completely immaculate. It's the pure Dharma, the perfectly clean, untainted state of being that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas inhabit. Let's move to and see how this builds. When we put this all together, we see a really profound evolution in understanding. The initial medicine the Buddha gave to cure our attachments was recognizing the physical world as impermanent, full of suffering, and lacking a permanent ego, or non-self. But the final destination, the ultimate truth revealed in this sutra, is reality defined by eternity, supreme bliss, an unbreakable true self, and absolute purity. That first teaching, it's a stepping stone. This new teaching is the summit. Section 6, Ultimate Liberation. So, what does this all mean? What does this monumental paradigm shift actually mean for our individual spiritual journeys? The text uses one more brilliant analogy to clear this up. It says that other external philosophies that claim to teach a soul or a self are like a bug eating wood accidentally forming a letter. Think about it. Imagine a termite chewing on a plank of wood, and by pure chance, the hole it leaves looks like a letter of the alphabet. The bug doesn't know how to write. The Buddha says worldly philosophies guessing at a self are exactly like that bug. They're just lucky, unguided accidents. But the Buddha's teaching of the true self, that is deliberate, conscious, absolute truth. He is the author deliberately writing the letter. Recognizing this brings about ultimate liberation. The sutra compares living in the delusion of purely impermanent suffering to a silkworm totally trapped in its own cocoon. When you finally understand those 4 pillars, eternity, bliss, true self, and purity, you break right out of that cocoon. Recognizing that you have access to this eternal true self within the Dharmakaya provides immense, profound comfort. It completely strips away the anxiety and the terror of living in such a fleeting, unpredictable world. Which brings us to our final thought. The Mahaparinirvana Sutra takes us on this incredible journey from weeping over the death of the physical body to celebrating the joyous, eternal reality that lies beneath absolutely everything. It asks us to stop spinning like the drunkard and to finally see the stillness of the sky. So I leave you with this. If the ultimate reality of the universe is supreme bliss, and your true self is eternal and unbreakable, what is there left to fear? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.